The rain comes down hard on Michigan Avenue, the kind of cold November rain that soaks through a coat in 30 seconds and turns the sidewalk into a mirror of broken light. Nora Callahan stands outside the Grand Harlow Hotel and does not move. She has been standing here for maybe a minute, maybe five, she cannot tell. The champagne is still cold on her hands where the glass trembled before she set it down. The emerald dress she saved 3 months to buy is already dark with water at the shoulders. She does not reach up to fix it. She does not reach for anything at all. Inside that ballroom, 200 people are still laughing. She can hear the jazz quartet through the glass doors behind her. She can hear the low roar of important men saying important things to each other. She can hear, if she listens hard enough, the particular quality of silence that fell over the nearest group of investors when her husband of 8 years laughed his cold, polished laugh and said loud enough for a small country to hear that Nora was many things, but beautiful was an exaggeration. That he kept her around because she was useful. That she knew how to stay quiet, not embarrass him most of the time. Most of the time, she had stood there with the glass trembling in her hand and smiled. That is the part that will stay with her longest, she thinks. Not what Derek said, not the way the investors shifted their weight and looked at their shoes, not the way not one single person in that room said a word in her defense. What will stay with her is the smile, the automatic trained 8-year-old reflex of smiling when she wanted to scream. She had excused herself. She had walked to the restroom. She had stood at the sink looking at a woman in a mirror wearing an emerald dress and realized she did not entirely recognize her. Then she had walked straight through the lobby and out the front door and into the rain. That was 11 minutes ago. Nora starts walking. She does not know where she is going. She has $31 in her clutch, a lipstick, a hotel room key card that belongs to Derek, and a cell phone that Derek pays for and therefore monitors when he remembers to. She has no car, no credit card in her own name. No friends left in this city because Derek had spent the better part of 4 years explaining to her carefully and patiently why each of them was not actually good for her. She walks past the dark windows of closed stores. Mannequins in expensive coats stand behind glass, frozen in poses of cheerful confidence, and Nora thinks that she and those mannequins have more in common than she would like to admit. She has been frozen in poses of cheerful confidence for 8 years. She has been displayed. She has been arranged to look a certain way in certain light. She turns down a side street without deciding to. The city does not care about her. That is the thing about Chicago in November. The wind off the lake does not care. The towers of glass and steel rising on either side of her do not care. The rain does not care. There is something almost comforting about it, the total indifference of a city that has 10,000 stories happening at once and cannot possibly pause for hers. She passes a dry cleaner, a pharmacy, a parking structure, a restaurant with fogged windows where couples are eating dinner in warm yellow light. Then she sees it, a small cafe on the corner, light spilling from its windows onto the wet pavement in a way that looks almost warm. The sign above the door reads Nocturne in script that is elegant without trying too hard. It is open. At this hour on a Tuesday night in November, it is open. Nora pushes through the door. The interior is quiet and close, dark wood and leather booths, and the low murmur of jazz from speakers she cannot locate. There is a bartender behind the counter, a young woman with her dark hair pulled back, polishing a glass with the focused attention of someone who finds the work genuinely satisfying. There are 2 other patrons, visible, a couple in a booth near the back, who are speaking so quietly they might as well be sharing a secret. And there is a man at the bar. He is sitting with his back to the door. She registers him only as a shape. Broad shoulders in a dark suit, a glass of something amber in front of him, a stillness about him that is different from rest. This man is not relaxed. He is contained. There is a difference. Nora takes a table near the window as far from everyone else as the room allows. She sets her clutch on the table and her hands in her lap and stares at the rain running down the glass. The bartender appears beside her. She is young, maybe 25, with quaint eyes and a name tag that reads Wren. Rough night, Wren says. It is not quite a question. Nora looks up. Is it that obvious? Wren smiles in a way that is sympathetic without being pitying. The mascara, she says. Can I get you something? On the house. Just water, Nora says. Please. And maybe some napkins. Wren nods and disappears and comes back with water and napkins and a small plate of shortbread that Nora did not ask for and is grateful for in a way she cannot explain. Take your time, Wren says. We are open until 2. Nora spends the next hour at that table. She cleans her face. She drinks her water. She eats one piece of shortbread and then another and then the third because no one is watching and no one is going to make a comment about her appetite. She stares at the rain and thinks about her life with a clarity that comes from being completely alone for the first time in a very long time. She married Derek Ashford when she was 24. She had been a pediatric nurse for 2 years, by then young and competent and quietly proud of work that mattered. Derek was 41 and polished and successful in ways that seemed at 24 like security. He was attentive. He remembered things she said. He called when he said he would call. He made her feel in those early months like the most important person in any room he walked into. She did not see it coming. That is what she has spent 8 years trying to understand. She did not see the way the attention curdled into scrutiny, the way the care calcified into control, the way he began slowly and so gradually she could not point to a single moment. It started to suggest that her friends were not really good for her, that her nursing work was exhausting her, that she did not need to talk to her sister Delia as often as she did, that Delia had always been a negative influence. By the time she understood what was happening to her, the walls were already up. No money of her own, no support system, no job because Derek had convinced her she was too tired, too stressed, too needed at home. No sister because Derek had, she would later learn, sent messages from her phone telling Delia that she needed space, that Delia was making things harder, that she did not want to talk. 3 years of silence with the person who knew her best in the world. Sitting in Nocturne with the rain against the window and the jazz low and warm around her, Nora feels something she has not felt in a very long time. Not grief, not fear, something hotter than both of those. She is 32 years old. She has $3,000 in an account Derek does not know about, money she has been setting aside for 6 months, in amounts small enough not to trigger his attention. She has a nursing license she has not used in 3 years. She has nothing else that belongs to her, and she has never been angrier in her life. She does not notice the man from the bar until he is standing beside her table. She looks up and finds him watching her with an expression she cannot immediately categorize. He is tall, broad in the shoulders with dark hair that is slightly damp at the edges from the weather. His eyes are a shade of gray, the color of water before a storm. He is wearing a charcoal suit that fits him the way expensive things fit people who have worn expensive things long enough not to notice them. He carries himself with a stillness that she clocked across the room but is more striking up close. This is not a man who fidgets. This is not a man who fills silence with noise. Excuse me, he says. His voice is low and controlled. I am sorry to bother you. I noticed you came in alone and you seemed upset. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Nora's first instinct is immediate and categorical. She has had enough of men. She has had enough of their concern and their management and their careful attention that turns out to be about them. But she pauses, because there is nothing predatory in his tone, nothing flirtatious. He is not leaning toward her. He is not performing sympathy. He sounds with a precision that surprises her, like someone asking a question he actually wants the answer to. I am fine, she says. The words taste like the lie they are. The man raises one eyebrow very slightly, as if he has heard the untruth as clearly as she has. He does not push. If you say so, he says. If you need anything, I will be at the bar. My name is Callum. He turns to leave. And Nora, who came in here to be alone, who does not want to talk to anyone, who is furious and exhausted and wet and wearing a ruined dress, hears herself say, "Wait." He stops, looks back at her. Why, she asks, why would you care whether a stranger is all right? It is a genuine question. She is not being hostile. She actually wants to know. Callum considers it for a moment before answering, because sometimes, he says slowly, the difference between surviving a bad night and not surviving, it comes down to one person noticing that something is wrong. Nora looks at him. The words land somewhere unexpected, somewhere behind her sternum, where she has been carrying a weight for years. All the nights she had wanted someone to notice. All the rooms where she had been quietly drowning while people discussed real estate returns around her. Sit down, she says. Please. Callum does not hesitate. He takes the chair across from her, his movements economical and deliberate. Up close, she can see that he is older than she first registered, late 30s, perhaps, with the kind of face that has seen enough to stop being surprised by most things. There are fine lines at the corners of his eyes. His hands on the table are still. I am Nora, she says. It is nice to meet you, Nora. He pauses. I wish the circumstances were better. She almost laughs. It is the first time that particular impulse has surfaced in longer than she can remember. You and me both, she says. They sit in a silence that is against all probability not uncomfortable. Ren materializes and refills Nora's water and brings Callum a fresh glass without being asked. Then she disappears again with the discretion of someone who has learned when people need to be left alone. Finally, Nora speaks because the story has been pressing at her throat for hours, and this is the first moment she has been into the presence of someone who is not connected to Derek, not monitoring her, not performing a role in the machine of her marriage. I walked out of my husband's birthday party tonight, she says, left him there with 200 of his closest business associates. He had not noticed I was gone. He was too busy accepting congratulations. Callum nods once slowly. Sounds like a difficult marriage. That is one word for it, Nora says. What word would you use? She thinks about it seriously the way the question deserves. A mistake, she says finally. A very long, very expensive mistake. Callum does not offer advice, does not suggest counseling or communication, or the various remedies that people who have not lived inside a controlled marriage tend to offer. He simply waits. The worst part, Nora says, and the words come faster now, is that I knew. Not everything, but something. From the beginning, I knew something was off, and I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that every relationship has problems, that it would get better after we were married. She stops. It did not get better. People show you who they are, Callum says quietly. The mistake is not in missing it the first time. The mistake is in not believing them the second. Nora looks at him, really looks at him. There is something in those gray eyes that she recognizes without being able to name. Not the softness of someone who has lived an easy life. Something else. A weight carried a long time. You sound like someone speaking from experience, she says. Everyone has a past, Callum says. The question is whether you let it define your future. They talk for another hour. She learns things and does not learn other things. He owns businesses in Chicago, he says, and is vague about the specifics in a way that she notices but does not press. He has a younger sister who lives out of state. His mother died 5 years ago. He has never been married, though he was engaged once long ago. She decided my life was too complicated, he says, and there is an old pain in the words, the kind that has healed as much as it is going to and no further. At some point, Ren brings food that neither of them ordered, and both of them eat, and the rain comes and goes against the window. And the other patrons leave and new ones arrive, and the jazz plays its low, continuous thread through the room. By 1 in the morning, Nora feels more like herself than she has in years. There is something in the nature of talking to a stranger, she thinks. Someone who has no investment in who she is supposed to be. With Callum, she does not have to perform. She does not have to manage his feelings about her feelings. She can simply be what she is, which tonight is angry and frightened and more alive than she has felt in a very long time. I should go, she says finally. Where Callum asks. A hotel, she says. I have some money, enough for a few nights while I figure out the next step. And then, she tries to smile. I have not gotten that far yet. Callum is quiet for a moment. Then he reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket and slides a card across the table to her. It is simple cream-colored with a name and a phone number and nothing else. No title, no company, no explanation. If you need anything, he says, job, place to stay, legal help, whatever, call that number, day or night. Nora picks up the card. She holds it and looks at this man who walked over to a wet stranger in a nearly empty cafe at midnight and asked if she was all right. Why, she says, you do not know me. I know enough, Callum says. I know you are scared and alone and that you deserve better than what you are going back to. And I know that sometimes the only thing standing between someone and a better life is a single opportunity. She stares at the card and then at the man who gave it to her and feels something shift in the air between them that she cannot name and does not try to. Thank you, she says. Callum stands and buttons his jacket. Do not thank me yet. Just promise me you will use it if you need to. I promise, Nora says. He holds her gaze for a moment. Something passes between them that is not romance, not yet, but is the beginning of some kind of recognition. The sense of two people who have been carrying similar weights in different directions and have just briefly set them down in the same place. Then he nods once and walks out of Nocturne into the Chicago night. Nora sits alone with the card in her hand. She does not know, sitting here in this warm cafe with the rain slowing outside, that she has just made a decision that will unravel the next several months of her life. She does not know that Callum Voss is one of the most powerful men in Chicago, that his name is spoken carefully in certain rooms and not spoken at all in others, that the reach of his influence extends into every corner of the city in ways that the law knows about and cannot quite touch. She does not know any of that. She knows only that she gave her word to a stranger and that for the first time in 8 years, a promise she made does not feel like a cage. She walks out of Nocturne into the cold. The rain has stopped. The street is wet and bright under the lights, every puddle a small mirror of the sky. She starts walking toward the nearest hotel with her ruined heels clicking against the pavement and the card pressed against her palm, and something that might, she thinks cautiously, be the first hairline crack in the wall she has been standing behind for 8 years. She does not look back. Behind her, across the street, in the shadow between two parked cars, a black SUV sits with its engine idling. But it is not watching her. She realizes this because the angle is wrong. The SUV is not parked where a car would park if it was watching the door she just came out of. It is parked where a car would park if it was watching the building across the street. The narrow entrance of a private club with no visible sign. The kind of door that has no name above it. The kind of entrance that exists to avoid being noticed. And standing at that door, hand on the arm of a woman in a black coat whose face Nora cannot see, is Derek. Nora stops walking. She stands in the middle of the sidewalk in the wet November night and watches her husband of 8 years, man who filed what she will later learn was a missing person report because he was worried about her mental health, laugh at something the woman in the black coat says. His hand moves from her arm to the small of her back. They go through the door together. The door closes. The SUV across the street does not move. Someone inside it is watching that door. Someone has been watching that door for longer than she has been standing here. Someone is watching Derek. Nora stands very still. 200 people spent this evening celebrating Derek Ashford as a devoted family man who built an empire and maintained a beautiful home life. He filed the missing person report hours ago. He has sent her 37 messages oscillating between concern and threats. He has been performing worry for anyone who would watch. And he has been here, in this street, with this woman. Nora feels the anger, which has been burning low and steady since the ballroom turned into something cleaner and colder and considerably more useful. She has spent 8 years being afraid of leaving, afraid of having nothing, afraid of the consequences Derek described to her so carefully and so often that she began to believe them herself, afraid of being alone. She is alone right now. She is standing in the rain with ruined shoes and $31 and a card from a stranger, and she is watching her husband go through a door with another woman, and the fear is still there, but underneath it, something else has arrived. Something that feels like ground. Actual solid ground after years of standing on ice. She turns away from the door and starts walking again. Faster now. She finds a hotel 3 blocks away. She pays cash for one night. The room is small and beige, and the carpet is the brown of a place that makes no promises. She sits on the edge of the bed and reads all 37 of Derek's messages in order from first to last, and when she is done, she reads them again. She has read messages like these before. For years, she has read them and felt the fear and the guilt and the exhausting pull of the familiar, the way a bad situation becomes comfortable simply because it is known. But tonight, something in her has shifted, and she reads these messages as what they actually are, which is a script. A careful practice sequence of emotional pressure points designed by a person who has learned exactly how she works and uses that knowledge like a set of keys. She does not respond to any of them. She turns the phone off and sets it on the nightstand and lies back on the bedspread and stares at the ceiling. She thinks about the woman in the black coat. She thinks about the SUV watching the door. She thinks about a stranger in a cafe who sat across from her for 2 hours and asked nothing of her except whether she was all right. She sleeps. For the first time in longer than she can remember, she sleeps without listening for footsteps in the hall. She wakes the next morning at a light coming through curtains she did not close, and the city going about its business outside, and she lies still for a moment, taking inventory of what she has. $3,000 in the account Derek does not know about. A nursing license not actively used but legally intact. A prepaid phone she buys at a drugstore 2 blocks away using cash. A card with a name and a phone number. She moves from one mid-range hotel to another over the next 2 days, paying cash using her real name, because she has no choice because her driver's license is all she has. She eats at places that do not require a card, she thinks. She thinks about what she wants, which sounds like a simple question and is not. She has spent 8 years organizing her desires around Derek's preferences until her own have become archaeological, buried under layers of what she was told she wanted. Piece by piece, she excavates. What does a 32-year-old woman with $3,000 and a nursing license and no one who currently knows where she is actually want? She wants her sister back. She wants to be a nurse again. She wants to stand in a room and not monitor the temperature of the air for signs of Derek's mood. On the third day, she checks the account balance on her phone. She has spent $400 on hotels and food in the prepaid phone. At this rate, she has maybe 10 days before the decision gets made for her. She thinks about Derek's messages, which have by now escalated from concern to anger, to a coldness that she knows from experience is more dangerous than either. She thinks about the missing person report, which a woman at the hotel front desk mentioned having seen on the local news. Devoted husband searches for wife who disappeared after birthday celebration. She knows how this goes. She has watched Derek construct narratives before. He is very good at them. She picks up the prepaid phone and dials the number on the cream-colored card. It rings twice. Romano Enterprises, a woman says. How may I direct your call? Nora hesitates. I am looking for Callum Voss. He gave me this number. My name is Nora Callahan. Please hold. The silence that follows is long enough that Nora becomes convinced she has made a mistake, that the card was politeness rather than intention, that Callum Voss has spoken to 100 wet strangers in 100 late-night cafes and cannot be expected to remember any of them. Then his voice comes through the line. Nora, he says, I was hoping I would hear from you. Relief moves through her so completely that she has to sit down on the edge of the hotel bed. You remember me, she says. Of course I remember you. There is warmth in his voice and underneath it something focused, attentive. Are you all right? Are you safe? I am in a hotel. I left Derek that night after we talked. I have not been back. Good. A pause that feels like a breath held and released. Have you eaten today? The question catches her sideways. She tries to remember. Half a sandwich yesterday, coffee this morning. I am fine, she says. That is not an answer. She can hear him frown. Where are you staying? She tells him the name of the hotel. There is a moment of quiet. I am sending a car, Callum says. It will be there in 20 minutes. I want you to get in it and let it bring you somewhere safe. Safe. Safer than where you are now. Derek Ashford has connections, Nora. If he wants to find you a hotel under your real name, is the first place he will look. You checked in with your license both nights. He has people who can pull that record. The cold that moves through her is immediate. She had not thought about that. She might as well have left a trail of lit flares. How do you know about Derek's connections, she says, a pause that is a fraction longer than the others. I know a lot of things about a lot of people. It is part of my work. Get in the car, Nora. I will explain everything when you arrive. The line goes dead. Nora sets the phone down on the bedspread and looks at the far wall for a long moment. Every reasonable part of her mind is raising its hand. Getting into a car sent by a man she spent 2 hours talking to in a cafe is not a reasonable thing to do. Letting that car take her to an unknown location is not a reasonable thing to do. She is a woman who has just escaped one situation where someone else controlled her environment and is now considering voluntarily walking into another. She knows this. She is not naive, but she also knows this. She sat across from Callum Voss for 2 hours and watched him. She has spent 8 years studying men who say one thing and mean another, men who arrange their expressions for an audience. Men whose kindness is a preliminary to something else. She is very good at it by now, reading the gap between what someone performs and what they actually are. Callum had not performed anything. He had simply been there patient and still asking nothing, offering something she did not know she needed until he offered it. She collects her bag. She goes downstairs to wait. The car arrives in 19 minutes, a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver is a man of about 50, steady-faced and professional, who opens the door for her and says only that he is taking her to Mr. Voss's residence and that the drive is approximately 40 minutes. Nora gets in. She watches Chicago move past the tinted windows as the car carries her north, and then north again, through neighborhoods that grow quieter and wider space through the kind of old wealth that does not announce itself. The house is set back from the road behind trees and gates, the streets with no sidewalks because no one here walks anywhere. The car turns onto a private road. The gate at the end of it slides open at their approach. The driveway curves through bare November oaks for longer than a driveway has any right to, and then the house comes into view. It is not a house in the sense that Nora's mind had provisionally supplied. It is 3 stories of gray stone and glass on a rise above what she can see as the car circles is a private lake. The architecture is spare and clean, nothing ostentatious, nothing announcing itself. It is the architecture of someone who has had money long enough to stop needing to prove it. A man in a dark jacket opens the car door before the car has fully stopped. He is young, late 20s maybe, with the watchful alertness of someone whose attention is specifically trained. "Mrs. Callahan," he says, "I am Stellan. Mr. Voss asked me to bring you inside." She follows Stellan through the front entrance into a foyer with a ceiling that soars in an abstract sculpture suspended at its center that catches the gray November light in ways that seem to change as she moves. The floors are polished concrete. The art on the walls is serious and quiet. Stellan leads her through the house, and she takes it in the way she takes in everything now carefully and without letting her face show what she notices. The distance between rooms, the way sound carries and does not carry, the things that tell you how a person actually lives as opposed to how they want to be seen. She is led to a covered terrace at the back of the house. The lake spreads out below, dark and restless under the November sky, and Callum Voss is standing at the railing, looking at it with his hands in his pockets. He turns when she steps through the doors, and something moves across his face that is over quickly, some private relief before the contained expression resettles. "You came," he says. "You sent a car," she says. "I almost did not get in it, but you did." Nora looks at him across the space of the terrace. She is tired. She is wearing clothes she has been wearing for 3 days, and she has $30 left, and her whole life is in the bag on her shoulder. She is standing on the terrace of a mansion owned by a man she met in a cafe at midnight, and she has absolutely no idea what she is doing here. "You are already looking," she says. "Derek, he filed the missing person report." "He did." Callum turns to face her fully. "He is claiming you had a breakdown, that he is worried about your safety. He is very convincing." The bitterness of that knowledge settles into her chest. Of course he is. Derek is always convincing. That is the particular genius of it, that the thing that made him dangerous was the same thing that made no one believe her when she tried twice in the early years to describe what was happening inside their marriage. He was too polished, too credible, too completely the image of the concerned and responsible man. "What do I do?" she says. Callum looks at her steadily. "You let me help you. You stay here where my people can keep you safe. You work with my lawyers to build a case for the divorce that Derek cannot simply dismiss. You trust that by the time this is finished, Derek Ashford will not be able to touch you again." Nora is quiet for a moment. "Why?" she says. "You keep doing this. Offering things. Why?" Callum is silent long enough that she thinks he might not answer. Then he says, "Because I have seen what men like Derek Ashford do to the people they are supposed to love. Because I have watched it happen to someone I could not protect. And because you walked into that cafe looking like the world had done its worst to you, and you still had enough left to keep going." He pauses. "That means something," he says. "To me it means something." Nora looks out at the lake. The water is the color of iron moving in slow, cold patterns under the November sky. She thinks about the woman she was 2 days ago standing in the rain outside the Grand Harlow Hotel with champagne on her hands, and a smile she had trained herself to make, regardless of what she actually felt. She thinks about the woman who stood on a wet sidewalk at 1 in the morning and watched the man she married walk through a private door with his hand on another woman's back, and felt underneath the shock the cold clarity of something she had known for a long time becoming undeniable. She has been making decisions based on fear for 8 years. What the fear said was that she could not leave, that she had nothing, that she would be alone and broke and unable to manage, and that she needed Derek the way you need oxygen, not because you like it, but because the alternative is not survivable. She is here on this terrace having left, having managed, having survived on her own terms. The fear was wrong. Okay, she says, I will stay. For now. Callum nods. Stellan will show you to your room. Get some rest, Nora. Tomorrow we figure out where to start. He turns back to the lake, and Nora follows Stellan inside into the warmth of the house, into the room that will be hers, into the beginning of something she cannot yet name, and is for the first time in a very long time, not afraid to find out. 3 weeks pass. Nora wakes each morning in the room on the second floor and spends a few seconds reorienting herself, the way you do when the geography of your life has changed faster than your sleeping mind can track. The ceiling here is high and white. The windows face east over the lake. The light that comes in is clean and cold and does not carry any particular expectation of her. Then she gets up and faces another day. The house runs on rhythms she learns by observation. Orrin Farley, who manages the domestic operations of the estate with the precision of a man who has spent 40 years making complicated things look effortless, appears each morning at 6 to coordinate with whoever needs coordinating. He is 63, Boston-born, with a dry wit he deploys sparingly, and a gift for anticipating what a room needs before anyone in it has thought to ask. He calls her Mrs. Callahan and does not ask questions, and she appreciates both of these things more than she can say. Garrett runs the kitchen. He is a large, unhurried man from the mountains of West Virginia who learned to cook from his grandmother and has turned that inheritance into something remarkable. He feeds Nora without making an occasion of it, and she learns quickly that the way to acknowledge his care is simply to eat what he makes and come back the next day. Stellan is present the way weather is present, always somewhere nearby, rarely obtrusive. She understands within the first few days that his job is not just administrative. The way his eyes move when strangers approach the property. The quality of his attention at doors and windows. She has spent enough years reading the atmosphere of a room to understand what Stellan is, even if no one offers her a formal description. Callum himself is gone most days. He leaves early, returns late, and when he is in the house, he carries with him the gravity of a man managing things that are not discussable at dinner. Men come and go at odd hours through a side entrance she cannot see from her room but can sometimes hear. Conversations happen in other parts of the house, in voices calibrated for privacy. Twice in the first week, she rounds a corner and finds Stellan and another man in a discussion that stops immediately upon her appearance. She is not naive about what this means. She came of age in Chicago. She knows what this kind of operation looks like from the outside, the structure of it, the way power arranges itself in a room, the difference between the kind of authority that is granted by institutions and the kind that exists underneath institutions, like bedrock exists underneath roads. She knows what Callum Voss is, or close enough, and she sits with that knowledge and examines it carefully. Here's what she finds when she examines it. Callum has not lied to her. He has been vague. He has declined to explain. But he has not looked her in the eye and said one thing while meaning another, and she has become, through 8 years of close study, expert at knowing the difference. So she stays. She helps in the kitchen when Garrett lets her. She reads in the library, which has the walls-to-ceiling books of someone who actually reads rather than collecting. She walks the grounds when the weather permits her breath, clouding in the November air, the lake gray below. She begins in small, incremental ways to feel like a person who is allowed to take up space. On the 11th day at the estate, Nora wanders into the West Wing. She has not been here before. The house is large enough that she is still discovering corridors, still coming across rooms she has not entered. This part of the house is quieter. The light different, the art on the walls replaced by something more personal. Photographs and frames a child's drawing in a mat under glass. She stops at the drawing. It is a lake rendered in crayon with 2 stick figures standing at the edge, one large, one small. Underneath, in careful child's printing, it says "Me and Daddy." Nora stands looking at it for a moment. At the end of the hallway, a door stands slightly open. Light comes through the gap, warm and specific to a room that is being used. She should walk away. She knows she should. But she has been walking away from things for 8 years, and the habit is one she is trying to break. She pushes the door open. The room is smaller than hers, with walls painted a pale blue that has faded in the way things fade when they have been in a house for years and belong there. The furniture is child-scaled. There are books on shelves, stuffed animals arranged with the studied casualness of someone who has opinions about where they should go, drawings pinned to a corkboard above a small desk. And sitting cross-legged on the floor with a sketch pad in her lap, with the focused expression of someone deep in serious work, is a little girl. She looks up when Nora enters. Her eyes are very dark, the exact shade of Callum's, and she has the same quality of self-possession, that stillness, that in a child suggests either extraordinary confidence or extraordinary practice. "Who are you?" the girl says. Her voice is steady. Nora crouches down so they are at the same level. "My name is Nora. I am staying here for a little while. Your father is helping me with something." She has already worked it out. The eyes, the jaw, the composure. This child belongs to Callum Voss with a certainty that goes beyond the physical. The girl studies her with the seriousness of a scientist examining data. "Are you his girlfriend?" "No," Nora says it gently. "Just a friend. Your dad is helping me with something difficult." The girl seems to accept this with equanimity. "Daddy helps a lot of people." She returns her attention to the sketch pad. "But mostly they are not girls." "That is probably true," Nora says. "What are you drawing?" "The lake." The girl turns the sketch pad so Nora can see it. The drawing is surprisingly sophisticated for a child this age, the water rendered in careful parallel strokes of blue and gray, the bare trees along the opposite bank reaching up into a sky that has weather in it. "That is beautiful," Nora says, and means it entirely. "Thank you." The girl adds another stroke of gray to the water, considering it. "I draw when I am sad. It makes the sad go somewhere else." Nora is quiet for a moment. "Why are you sad today?" The question comes out before she has decided to ask it, and she waits for the child to retreat to give the deflection that children learn when adults have trained them that their emotional reality is inconvenient. Instead, the girl shrugs with a matter-of-factness that is somehow more affecting than distress would have been. "My mom went away," she says. "A long time ago. Sometimes I still miss her, especially in November." She thinks about this. "I do not know why November." Nora feels something shift in her chest, a door opening onto something large and old. "I know what it is to miss someone," she says. "My mother passed away a few years ago." The girl looks up at her with those dark, attentive eyes. "That is sad," she says. "But at least you had her. For a long time, probably. Some people do not even get that." The wisdom of it, delivered in a child's voice with a child's directness, lands somewhere it cannot be deflected from. This girl has thought about this, has found a way to hold her own loss that is generous rather than diminishing. Nora does not know who taught her to do that or whether no one did, and she worked it out herself. But either answer says something significant about who she is. "What is your name?" Nora asks. "Lily," the girl says. "Lily. Daddy calls me Lilybird sometimes." She adds a careful line to her drawing, but only when he thinks no one is listening. Callum's voice comes from the doorway then, and both of them look up. He is standing at the threshold in his jacket slightly earlier than his usual return, looking between Nora and his daughter with an expression that is complicated in a way she cannot immediately decode. It is not alarm. It is not displeasure. It is something that has opened unexpectedly in a face that is usually very controlled. "Lilybird," he says. His voice is different than it is anywhere else in the house. Softer at the edges. Unguarded in a way that is clearly specific to this room and this child. "I thought you were resting." "I was not tired," Lily says, with the reasonableness of someone who has made this argument before. And then Nora came. Callum looks at Nora. She looks back at him. Something passes between them that has no vocabulary yet. "Can she stay for dinner?" Lily asks. She did not say yes, but she did not say no either, which in my experience means possibly yes. Callum almost smiles. "In your experience." "I have a lot of experience," Lily says serenely. "Go find Oren." Callum says, "Tell him we will need the table set for 3. Lily scrambles up, tucks her sketch pad under her arm, and makes for the door, pausing to wave at Nora with the confidence of someone who has already decided how this evening will go. Then she is gone, and it is just Callum in the doorway, and Nora on the floor of his daughter's room, and the silence is full of things that have not been said yet. "You did not tell me you had a daughter," Nora says. Callum moves into the room. He picks up one of Lily's drawings from the desk, looks at it, sets it down. "I do not tell most people," he says. "It is safer that way. Safer for her." "Yes," he turns to face Nora. His expression has settled back into its usual composed register. But something is different now. Some layer of the architecture is visible that was not before. "My world is dangerous," he says. "There are people who would use her to get to me without hesitating. Keeping her existence known only to a very small number of people is the only protection I can offer her." Nora absorbs this. She thinks about Lily on the floor with her sketch pad making the sad go somewhere else. She thinks about what kind of life that is growing up behind the walls of a beautiful house where your existence is a secret your father keeps for your safety. Her mother, Nora says. Callum is quiet for a moment. He does not look away. "She did not die of illness," he says. "I have said that. It is what I tell people who ask, and most people do not ask more than once." He pauses. "She was killed. A targeted attack 5 years ago. Men who wanted to send me a message used her to send it." The words are flat and precisely chosen, the words of someone who has said this exact sentence before in the privacy of his own mind, who has worn the edges off it with repetition until it can be stated without collapse. But underneath the flatness is something that has no bottom to it. "Lily was 3, he says. She was in the house." Nora does not say she is sorry. She does not say anything for a moment because the horror of what he has just described does not respond well to the reflexive formulas of consolation. She sits with it the way she has learned to sit with painful things rather than rushing to smooth them over. "That is why you recognize something in me," she says finally. "That night at the cafe." Callum looks at her. "Yes," he says simply. "You saw it because you had seen it before. On someone I was supposed to protect." He is quiet for a moment. "I was not going to walk over to you. I had made the calculation, told myself it was not my business, that I had enough complications without adding a stranger's. And then you set the champagne glass down, and the way you set it down, the very careful way, and I have known that carefulness before. I could not walk away from it." They stand in Lily's room in the late afternoon light, the lake visible through the window, gray and patient. "That is the first honest thing anyone has told me," Nora says, "in a very long time." Callum nods once. He holds her gaze and she holds his, and neither of them looks away. And then Oren's voice comes from somewhere downstairs announcing that dinner is in 20 minutes, and the moment closes gently like a book being marked rather than finished. At dinner, Lily talks about her drawings and her books and a television program about marine biology that she has watched so many times she can recite the narration. Callum listens with the complete attention of a man for whom his daughter is the most interesting person in any room. Nora watches both of them and feels something settle into her chest like ballast. After dinner, Lily shows Nora her corkboard. Each drawing is dated in the corner. The lake in every season, the oak trees in summer, a bird she saw once and could not identify and drew from memory. "This is from August," Lily says. "This one is from September. I draw the same things so I can see how they change." "That is very wise," Nora says. Lily considers this. "Or maybe I just like the lake," she says. "Before I go any further, I want to stop and ask you something. If this moment found something in you, if you have ever watched a child carry a loss with more grace than any adult around them, and felt your heart do something complicated, leave a comment right now. Tell me where you are watching from. Because what Nora is about to discover about Derek, about Callum, about herself, is the reason this story matters. And you will not want to miss what comes next." That night, after Lily is in bed and the house has settled into its nighttime registers, Nora sits in the library with a book open in her lap that she is not reading. She is thinking about Derek, about the machinery of what he has put in motion. The missing person report, the frozen accounts, the media appearances, the lawyers. She is thinking that she has been waiting for someone to fix this, for Callum's lawyers to build the case, for the system to work, for the pieces to fall into the right places, while she stays in this beautiful house and heals. And she understands sitting here that waiting is the shape of the last 8 years of her life. She picks up the prepaid phone. It is 9 o'clock in Seattle, 2 hours behind Chicago. She dials a number she has not dialed in 3 years because Derek told her that Delia was bad for her mental health, that Delia stirred up conflict and resented their marriage and wanted to see it fail. He was very specific about it. He was very convincing. She dials her sister's number. It rings 4 times and she has already prepared herself for voicemail for the possibility that 3 years of silence has made her a stranger to the person who used to know her best. When the line connects and she hears her sister's voice. Nora, Delia's voice breaks on the single word. Nora, where are you? I have been watching the news. I saw the report he filed and I knew it was him. I have been trying to find a way to reach you. Nora closes her eyes. Hey, she says. Hey, I am okay. I am safe. I need to tell you some things. They talk for 2 hours. Delia tells her what Derek did, how the messages came written in Nora's name and Nora's writing style, close enough to be convincing. How they said things that sounded like Nora on a bad day, the kind of things that are almost right, but not quite the kind of things someone might write if they had read 3 years of your texts and learned to approximate your voice. How Delia had responded at first, then pushed back, then gone silent when the messages stopped coming. I kept the screenshots, Delia says. I kept all of it. I did not know what to do with them, but I kept them. That is evidence, Nora says. That is exactly what I need. She can hear Delia exhale. Tell me what to do. She stays on the phone until after midnight. When she sets it down, her hands are steady, and there is something in her chest that she recognizes as purpose. Not hope exactly. Something more functional than hope. She did this. She picked up the phone and called the person who knew Derek's methods and had documented them. She found the first piece of evidence herself without waiting for Callum's lawyers or Callum's resources or anyone else's framework. She falls asleep that night with the prepaid phone on the nightstand, Delia's number the most recent in the call log. 2 days later, the threat arrives from a different direction. She knows something has happened before Callum tells her. She can read it in the way Stellan moves through the house that morning, something tighter in his posture, the alertness of someone who has been given new information and is repositioning around it. She finds Callum in his study before he comes to find her. He looks up when she appears in the doorway. His expression confirms what she already suspected. Derek's investigator found the hotel, she says. Callum nods slowly. He traced the license records from the first 2 nights before you came here. And then this morning, Derek called me directly. She goes still. He called you. He proposed a transaction, Callum says. You return. In exchange, he stops pursuing certain lines of inquiry into my operations. The stillness in Nora's body is very complete. He called you, she says again. Not me. Callum meets her eyes. Yes. Because I am the object in the transaction, not the party to it. Callum does not look away. I told you no, he says, immediately and without qualification. And then I was going to come and tell you, but I found you first. Yes. Nora stands in the doorway of his study for a moment, looking at this man who has given her resources and shelter and something that feels increasingly like solidarity, who turned down Derek's offer without hesitation, who was coming to tell her, and who did not think to tell her before the call happened. I appreciate what you are doing, she says carefully. Everything you have done, but I need you to understand something. She pauses, finding the words. I left one situation where someone else controlled the information around me, where decisions were made for me by someone who believed he knew better. I cannot be in another one of those situations, even if the intentions are entirely different. Callum is quiet. If Derek contacts you again, she says, if anything happens that involves me, I need to know. Not after. Not when you have already handled it. I need to know. He looks at her for a long moment. Then he nods. You are right, he says. I am sorry. It is such a straightforward acknowledgement. No qualification, no reversal, no suggestion that she is being unreasonable. Just you are right. I am sorry. Nora has been waiting 8 years for those words in that sequence and never received them. She uncrosses her arms. She sits down in the chair across from his desk. What do you know about Derek's operations, she asks. The ones he is threatening to investigate. Callum studies her. His development projects have structural overlaps with certain financial arrangements that would not survive close examination, he says. It is why I knew about him before I knew about you. She sits with this. You were watching Derek before the night at the cafe. Yes. She looks at him steadily. Then she says, what we need is to make Derek believe he has an advantage, that he is about to win, to make him commit to something on the record that he cannot walk back. Callum is very still. I want to set a trap, Nora says. I want to let him think I am vulnerable and isolated and about to give up. Give him enough rope to do what he always does, which is reach for more than he is entitled to. And I want to catch him doing it. Callum looks at her with an expression she has not seen on him before. It takes her a moment to identify it because she is not accustomed to seeing it directed at her. It is respect. Walk me through it, he says. She does. For the next hour, sitting in his study with the gray November lake visible through the windows, Nora lays out the architecture of a plan. She needs a location somewhere public but controllable. She needs Stellan and his team positioned but invisible. She needs a recording device small enough to carry without detection. And she needs Derek to believe for long enough that she is alone and running out of options. Callum listens without interrupting. When she is finished, he is quiet for a moment. Then he says, I can provide the location, the team, and the equipment. But you understand what this means. You will be the visible element. If something goes wrong before my people can intervene. I understand, Nora says. You have thought about that. I have thought about nothing else for 3 years, she says. The difference is that this time I am choosing to be there. I am not stumbling into danger because I did not know it existed. I am walking toward it with my eyes open because it is the fastest way through to the other side. Callum looks at her for a long moment. Then he says, all right. Meanwhile, Derek's lawyers have not been idle. That same week, a letter arrives addressed to Callum through his legal counsel. It is signed by Prentice Hale, Derek's attorney of 12 years. Nora sees the envelope on Callum's desk and does not know the name yet. But when Callum mentions it, something in his tone makes her ask who Prentice Hale is. Derek's man, Callum says, has been since before I knew Ashford's name. Very polished, very connected. He has been at Derek's side at every function, every filing, every press event for over a decade. Nora is quiet for a moment. She files the name away. Lily finds Nora in the garden that afternoon, picking her way along the path that runs between the edge of the lawn and the lake. She is wearing a coat 3 sizes too large that must be Callum's, the sleeves rolled up, carrying her sketch pad under her arm with the purposefulness of someone on a specific artistic mission. Can I draw you, she asks. Nora stops. Me. You have an interesting face. Lily says this with the neutrality of an observation rather than a compliment. It has a lot of different things in it at the same time. All right, Nora says. They sit on a bench near the water, Lily cross-legged with the sketch pad on her knees, Nora facing the lake. The wind off the water is cold and smells of November and something mineral underneath it. Lily draws in focused silence. Nora watches the lake. My dad likes you, Lily says after a while, without looking up. I like him too, Nora says carefully. No, Lily is patient. I mean, he likes you the way he has not liked anyone before. I can tell because he is different when you are in the room. She adds a careful line to her drawing. He is more careful, like he is holding something he does not want to drop. Nora is quiet for a moment. Your dad is a good man, she says. Yes, Lily sounds very certain about this. He is also a complicated man. She thinks about it. I think good and complicated can go together. My teacher said people are mostly one thing, but I do not think that is true. I do not think so either, Nora says. Lily finishes the drawing and shows it to her. It is Nora from the side looking at the lake with the bare oaks behind her and the water in front. The face is simplified but recognizable, and Lily has caught something multiple in it, some combination of things that coexist without canceling each other out. You are very talented, Nora tells her. Lily studies the drawing critically. The eyes are not quite right, she says, but I can fix them next time. There is a next time, Nora thinks. Lily says it with the assurance of someone who has already decided. She is putting Lily to bed 3 weeks into her stay at the estate when the child reaches out and takes her hand, holding it with the unself-conscious grip of someone who does not yet have complicated feelings about reaching for what she needs. Nora, Lily says, are you going to stay? I do not know how long I will be here, Nora says. Things are complicated right now. I know about complicated. Lily is already drowsy, her dark eyes going soft at the edges. My dad has complicated things all the time. He always figures them out. He does, Nora says. You will too. Lily's grip loosens as sleep takes her. I think you are the kind of person who figures things out. Nora sits beside her in the quiet of the room for a long time after she falls asleep. The nightlight casts everything in warm amber. The lake is dark beyond the window. Somewhere in the house, Callum is doing the things he does in the evenings, the management of his world, and Nora is here in this small room with this sleeping child and feels something she had given up on feeling. She hears him in the doorway before he speaks. She has learned his particular footfall, the weight and rhythm of it. She loves you, Callum says quietly, from the doorway. Nora looks at him over her shoulder. I love her too, she says. I did not plan for it. He crosses the room and stands beside her, looking down at his sleeping daughter. In the amber light, he looks different, the armor of his daily life set aside, and she can see the man underneath it. The man who has been raising this child alone in a beautiful fortress of a house, keeping her secret and keeping her safe, and carrying the weight of what he cannot undo. She could use someone like you, he says, someone who sees her as herself, not as a responsibility or an asset. I can do that. I already am. He turns to look at her and they are close, the amber light catching the planes of his face, and she can see all of it, the gray eyes and the old grief and something alive underneath that has been waiting for a long time. I know, he says. That is why I am saying yes. The air between them is warm and very still. Then Callum takes a small step back, the kind of step that is a decision rather than a retreat. Get some rest, he says quietly. We have a plan to execute, and I need you clear-headed. He moves to the door. Callum, she says. He stops. After this is over, she says, after Derek, after the lawyers, after all of it, what happens then? He stands in the doorway for a moment without turning around. Then quietly in the voice he uses only in this room, he says, I suppose we find out together. He goes. Nora sits in Lily's room until the child's breathing deepens into full sleep, and then a little longer listening to the sound of the house and the distant water, and the quality of a night that feels for the first time in a very long time like it belongs to her. Christmas comes to the estate the way it comes to any house where a child lives with a particular urgency that adults cannot manufacture on their own. Lily has opinions about every aspect of it, from the placement of the tree in the front room to the specific shade of lights Orrin is allowed to string along the terrace railing. Orrin accepts her direction with the patience of a man who has understood that winning this particular negotiation is not the point. Nora had not planned to still be here for Christmas. When she arrived in November, she had been thinking in terms of weeks of a temporary arrangement that would bridge her from one version of her life to the next. She had not planned for Lily. She had not planned for the way the estate would begin to feel room by room and day by day, less like a shelter and more like a place that was adjusting itself around her presence. She has stopped thinking in terms of departure dates. On Christmas Eve, after Lily has gone to bed, still vibrating with anticipation, Nora and Callum sit on the covered terrace with cups of coffee and the lights from the estate reflecting off the dark lake below. The snow that has been threatening all week finally begins to fall light and unhurried, the kind of snow that makes the world go quiet by degrees. He gives her the bracelet that night. It is small and simple and exactly right in the way that something is exactly right when the person who chose it was paying close attention. A thin gold chain, a single charm, a butterfly no larger than her thumbnail. For new beginnings, he says, for the courage to spread your wings. She puts it on and looks at it on her wrist and does not say anything for a moment because the words that come to her first are too large for the occasion, and the occasion is already large enough. Thank you, she says finally. It is the right word, and it is not all of what she means, and from the way he nods, she understands that he knows this. They sit with the snow falling and the lake going dark and quiet below them, and the lights of the city visible in the far distance, and for a long time neither of them says anything at all. It is the kind of silence that would have made her uneasy, once the kind she would have rushed to fill. Now she can simply be inside it. Christmas morning belongs entirely to Lily. She is up before 6, the fact that Orrin appears to have anticipated, because there is coffee ready and a plate of Garrett's cinnamon rolls warm from the oven, when Nora comes downstairs to find Lily already stationed in the doorway of the front room, vibrating with the particular patience of a child who has been told she must wait. We have to wait for Daddy, Lily explains. Those are the rules. Those are good rules, Nora says. She pours a cup of coffee and stands beside her. I made some of those rules myself, Lily admits. Callum comes downstairs 10 minutes later in a dark sweater with his hair slightly disheveled, in a way that Nora has noticed means he slept well, and the expression he has when he sees the two of them standing in the doorway together is one she keeps returning to in the days that follow. Something that opened in him and did not close again. The gifts are opened with Lily's characteristic combination of enthusiasm and critical commentary. The art set earns genuine excitement. The stack of books on marine biology earns the kind of appraising review that suggests she will have opinions about each of them by February. But the gift that stops her entirely, the one that makes her sit very still in the middle of the wrapping paper, and the ribbons, is a small gold locket. Callum opens it for her. Inside is a photograph. Her mother, young, laughing, caught in a moment of easy happiness that must be from before everything that happened. I found it in storage, Callum says. His voice is careful and quiet. I thought you should have it. Lily looks at the photograph for a long time without speaking. Then she closes the locket carefully and puts it on and goes to her father and holds on to him with the completeness of a small person who knows what she has and is grateful for it. Nora watches them from across the room and understands with the clarity that comes from standing slightly outside a scene and being able to see all of it at once exactly what this family is to each other. What they have made together in a house by a lake where safety is maintained at great effort and love is the reason the effort is worth making. She understands, too, what she has come to be in this house. Not a guest, not a temporary arrangement, something that was missing and is no longer missing. January arrives in Chicago without ceremony, with cold and flat gray skies and a wind off the lake that has no patience for sentimentality. It is the kind of month that strips away everything that is not essential and leaves you with only what is true. The plan takes 8 days to build. Nora spends those 8 days in Callum's study for 2 hours each morning, working through the details with the methodical attention she once gave to patient charts and medication dosages. She learns how Stellan's team communicates in the field. She learns what a recording device can and cannot capture at distance. She learns the layout of the location. They have chosen a hotel bar in the Gold Coast called the Aldrin, where Derek has been seen twice in the past month. The kind of place where a woman appearing to be alone and uncertain would not be remarkable. She practices being uncertain. She stands in front of the mirror in her room and practices the expression she wore for 8 years, the slightly smaller version of herself, the woman who monitors the air before she speaks. It comes back faster than she would like. 8 years of a habit does not dissolve in 6 weeks. Callum watches her practice once from the doorway without her knowing. She only realizes he was there when she turns and finds him in the hall, his expression doing something careful and controlled that she has learned to read as feeling more than it shows. You do not have to do that anymore, he says. I know, she says, but I need to be able to do it one more time. He nods. He does not argue. He steps back and lets her make the call. On the 9th day, the plan goes into motion. Nora wears a gray coat she has not worn before, bought specifically for this, so that Derek's people, if they have cataloged her wardrobe, will not recognize it on sight. The recording device is clipped inside the collar. Her hair is down. She is wearing the butterfly bracelet on her wrist because she decided deliberately to wear it. It is hers. She is not hiding anything that belongs to her anymore. The Aldrin is dark wood and low lighting, and the kind of menu that charges $22 for a cocktail and means it as a statement about who belongs here. Nora has been here before twice at Derek's side, performing the role of the wife who knows which fork to use and which opinions to keep to herself. She sits at a corner table with a glass of water and a book she is not reading. She has been here 40 minutes when she becomes aware of the shift in the room. That means someone has entered who changes the atmosphere of it. She does not look up immediately. She turns a page. Stellan's voice comes through the small earpiece she is wearing, barely louder than her own pulse. 2 men through the east entrance, he says, positioning at the bar. She knows this part of the plan. Derek would not come himself, not initially. He would send people to confirm she is here and assess the situation before he commits to anything. She is being evaluated. She turns another page. 12 minutes pass. Then her phone buzzes with a text from a number she does not recognize. "I see you," it says. "We should talk." She looks up slowly as though the movement costs her something. The man at the bar who meets her eyes is mid-40s broad with the blankness of expression that indicates someone suppressing a great deal of active thought. He raises his chin slightly. She looks back down at her book. 2 minutes later, he slides into the chair across from her. He is not one of Derek's usual associates. She would recognize those men, the lawyers and developers and city functionaries who populate Derek's professional world. This man is from a different layer of that world entirely. "Mrs. Ashford," he says. "Callahan," she says. "My name is Callahan." He accepts this without visible reaction. "Mr. Ashford would like to see you. Mr. Ashford can make an appointment with my lawyer." The man looks at her with the patience of someone who has had this conversation many times. "There are easier ways to handle this," he says. "For everyone involved, I am sure there are," Nora says. "I am not interested in easy. I am interested in correct." He leans forward just slightly. "Mr. Ashford is prepared to be generous in the settlement," he says. "Very generous. The accounts, the property, all of it with no contest, in exchange for a quiet withdrawal of the proceedings and a return to the marital home." She makes herself look uncertain, makes herself look like a woman who is tired and frightened and considering the path of least resistance. "I would need to think about it," she says. "Of course." He slides a plain card across the table. "Just a phone number. Mr. Ashford is at the St. Julian Hotel this evening. He would like to hear from you directly. He believes a conversation between the two of you without lawyers would resolve the situation to everyone's satisfaction." Nora picks up the card. She holds it and nods very slowly the way a woman nods when she is not quite convinced but is almost there. The man stands, buttons his jacket and goes. He does not look back. But as he passes behind her chair, he places one hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of ownership so casual and reflexive that he probably does not notice he is doing it. It is the gesture of a man who has been told she belongs to his employer and believes it. Nora does not flinch. She holds the expression of a woman still deciding. But inside, she has already decided everything. Stellan's voice in her ear. "We have him on camera. Second man photographed the room when he came in, including you. Sending that to the legal team now. You did well." Nora sets the card face down on the table. Her hands are steady. She walks out of the Aldrin into the cold January air, and the car is there exactly where it is supposed to be. She gets in and breathes. That was the first trap. It closes cleanly. 3 days later, the second and larger piece of the plan executes. Nora is at a coffee shop on the north side, busy enough to provide cover, quiet enough that a recording device will pick up clearly. She has sent one message to the number from the St. Julian card. She is ready to talk, the message says. She is alone. She sits with her coffee and waits. He arrives 22 minutes later. Prentice Hale. She knows him before she has finished processing the recognition. The name Callum mentioned, the man Derek has relied on for 12 years, and now crossing the coffee shop toward her table, silver-haired and expensive-coated, the attorney stops when he is close enough to confirm what his eyes are telling him. He stops when he sees that she recognizes him. The calculation that moves across his face is visible, the assessment of risk, the professional training arguing with the reality in front of him. He sits down. He has decided that leaving is a worse option than staying. "Nora," he says. His voice is careful and neutral. "I did not expect to see you personally." "I imagine not," she says. "I imagine Derek expected to send someone I would not recognize." He looks at her with the measured attention of a man accustomed to finding the angle in a room. "What is it you want?" he says. "A better settlement. I can have a conversation with Derek about the terms." "I want a divorce," Nora says. "On the terms my attorney has already outlined. I want documentation of Derek's financial accounts, including the offshore ones, turned over to the court. And I want Derek to stop sending people to monitor and intimidate me." Prentice folds his hands on the table. He is thinking, working through the legal architecture of the situation, the exposure and the leverage and the angles. "Derek has concerns," he says carefully, "about certain aspects of your current living situation. The man you are staying with. There are questions about his suitability." Nora stops him. She does it by reaching into her coat pocket and placing the recording device on the table between them where he can see it clearly. She watches the color change in his face. Everything said in this conversation, she tells him, and everything that was said 3 days ago at the Aldrin by the man Derek sent to offer me a settlement in exchange for dropping the proceedings has been recorded. She pauses. That man was also photographed. The photographs and recordings have been provided to the legal team and to the federal prosecutor's office, which has been investigating Derek Ashford's financial operations for the past 14 months. Prentice Hale is very still. I am not here to threaten you, Nora says. I am here because I want you to go back to Derek and tell him that this is over, that the next move he makes, any move, will accelerate a process that is already in motion and that ends very badly for everyone connected to him, including his attorney of 12 years. The silence at the table is absolute. She picks up the recording device. She picks up her coffee. She stands. Whatever you thought this was, she says it is not that anymore. She walks out into the January cold. Her hands shake slightly in the car. Not from fear, or not entirely from fear. From the physical aftermath of sustained, controlled performance, the body releasing what the mind held in place. Stellan in the front seat does not comment. He drives. That is enough. When they get back to the estate, Callum is waiting in the foyer. He looks at her for a moment, reading whatever's in her face, and then he says simply, "Come and sit down." Garrett made something. She sits at the kitchen counter and eats the soup Garrett sets in front of her. Callum sits on the other side of the counter and drinks coffee and does not ask her to debrief until she is finished. Then she tells him everything. Prentice Hale, the recognition, the conversation, what she said at the end. Callum listens without interrupting. When she is done, he is quiet for a moment. Prentice Hale has been managing the legal cover for Derek's financial structure for at least 6 years, he says. The federal investigation already has his name in it. What you did today may have accelerated his decision to cooperate with the prosecutor. Nora absorbs this. Good, she says. Callum looks at her for a long moment. Yes, he says. Very good. That evening, Lily insists on teaching Nora a card game that appears to have rules that shift depending on who is losing. They play for an hour at the kitchen table while Garrett washes up and Orrin reads in the next room, and the house is warm, and Nora thinks not for the first time, and with increasing clarity, that this is what a home is supposed to feel like. 2 weeks later, on a gray Thursday morning in January, Derek Ashford is arrested. Nora watches it on television in Callum's study. The footage is from the sidewalk outside the Ashford Group offices on Walker Drive. Derek is in his coat, the charcoal one he wears when he wants to look serious and credible, and his expression in the footage is doing something she has not seen before. It is doing nothing. The performance has finally failed. The face behind the performance is blankly present, just a man in handcuffs being walked to a vehicle while cameras record it from 3 angles. The chyron beneath reads Chicago developer Derek Ashford arrested on federal charges, including fraud, financial conspiracy, and obstruction. Additional charges pending. Nora watches it. She watches it through to the end of the segment, and then she turns off the television and sits in the quiet of the study and breathes. She does not cry. What she feels instead is the sensation of something structural being removed from inside her chest, a weight so long-standing that her body had built itself around it, and now must relearn a different architecture. 8 years of bracing, 8 years of reading the room before she entered it, monitoring the atmospheric pressure of Derek's moods, calibrating every word and expression and decision against the question of what he would think of it. She does not have to do that anymore. It is a strange thing to discover that freedom, when it arrives, does not feel like what you expected. She had imagined relief as a door swinging open. This is quieter than that. This is more like the moment after a very loud sound has stopped, when you realize how much noise you had been living inside. She breathes. She looks at the dark screen. She looks at her hands in her lap. She is still sitting there when Lily finds her 10 minutes later. Is that the bad man? Lily asks, looking at the dark screen. Nora looks at her. Yes, she says. That is him. Is he going away now? Yes. Lily considers the dark screen with the seriousness she brings to everything. Good, she says. And then with the pragmatism of a child who has learned to locate the important things and move toward them. Can we have hot chocolate? Yes, Nora says. We can absolutely have hot chocolate. 3 days before the divorce hearing, Derek finds her again. Not in person. Through his new attorney, a younger and considerably more cautious man who is already aware of the federal investigation and is managing his involvement accordingly. The message is simple. Derek requests 15 minutes with Nora at the courthouse before the hearing in a supervised setting. He wants to speak to her directly. Callum tells her about the request the same hour it arrives. He does not recommend a course of action. He lays out the information and waits. She thinks about it for the rest of the day. She walks the lake path in the January cold, her breath clouding the bare oaks standing in their winter patience. She thinks about what Derek will say in those 15 minutes. She knows his arsenal. She has been cataloging it for years. The apology calibrated to sound like accountability while accepting as little of it as possible. The threat dressed as concern. The suggestion that she is making a mistake that only he fully understands. She thinks about whether she can sit across from Derek Ashford and feel nothing that he can use. She thinks about the woman who walked out of a hotel ballroom in November with $31 and a ruined dress and more anger than she knew what to do with. I will meet him, she tells Callum that evening. He does not argue. He nods. Stellan will be outside the room, he says. I know, she says. The meeting takes place in a small conference room off the main corridor of the Daily Center. A court officer stands outside the door. Derek is already seated when Nora enters. She has not seen him since the night she walked out of his birthday party. The footage of the arrest was the closest she has come, and footage flattens things, removes the three-dimensional quality of a person's presence. In the room, he is very present. He is thinner, or maybe it is the context, the fluorescent light, and the institutional chair, the removal of all the scenery he usually performs within. He looks at her. She sits down. For a moment, neither of them speaks. She waits. Letting him begin is a choice she has made deliberately. She is not going to give him the gift of a prompt. I want you to know, Derek says finally, that I understand I made mistakes. Nora says nothing. I handled things poorly, especially at the party. He pauses. I have been under a great deal of pressure, and I took it out on you in ways that were unfair. She recognizes this. This is the first movement, the acknowledgement calibrated to sound like accountability while accepting as little of it as possible. She has heard variations of it many times. She remains still. I think if we could sit down together, Derek says, without lawyers, without all of this, we could reach an understanding. The charges against me are going to be resolved. My attorneys are confident, and when they are, I would like to. She says, I know about Ingrid Forsyth. The room goes very quiet. Derek Ashford's face does something she has never seen it do in 80 years of marriage. It goes completely blank. Not the controlled blankness of his professional expression, but the blank of a man whose footing has entirely vanished. She watches him find it again. The recovery is impressive the way a professional fighter recovering from an unexpected blow is impressive. You can observe the technique while understanding it is being used against you. I do not know what you think, he says carefully. Cayman Islands, Nora says. Joint account. Her name has been on it for 3 years. The same 3 years as it happens, during which you told anyone who would listen that you were a devoted husband managing a wife with declining mental health. Derek is very still. I'm not here to negotiate, she says. I am here because you asked for 15 minutes and I have decided that I am not afraid of you anymore. She looks at him across the table. Not because anything has changed about you. You are exactly what you have always been. I am not afraid of you anymore because I finally understand what you actually are, which is a man who mistakes fear for love and control for care and has spent his entire life confusing the two. She stands. He finds his voice. You think Voss is better, Derek says. You think what he does is somehow cleaner than what I am. Nora looks at him for one more moment. Callum Voss has never once made me feel small, she says. That is the whole difference. That is all of it. She turns toward the door. He calls after her, raised voice now, the controlled surface finally cracking. You do not know what he has on you, he calls. I have documentation. I have people in 3 locations with instructions. If I go down, he goes with me. You tell him that. You tell him that if I am convicted, everything comes out. She stops walking. She reaches into her coat pocket. She takes out her phone. She turns around. Derek is standing near the table with the court officer stepping forward from the wall, and he looks at the phone in her hand, and she watches him understand in real time what she has just recorded. She holds his gaze for one long, unhurried moment. Then she gets in the elevator. The doors close. The elevator begins to move. She is alone in the small mirrored box of it, moving upward toward the lobby, and she looks at her own reflection in the polished metal of the doors and sees a woman she recognizes. Not the woman who smiled when she wanted to scream. Not the woman who excused herself to the restroom so she could collect herself without an audience. Not the woman who stood in the rain outside a hotel and could not think of a single place to go. The woman in the door looks like someone who knows what she is doing and where she is going and why, and is not afraid of any of those answers. Nora touches the butterfly bracelet on her wrist. The metal is warm. It has been on her wrist long enough now to carry her own temperature. She breathes in. She breathes out. The elevator opens into the courthouse lobby, and she walks through it and out the front doors and into the January cold. And Stellan is there on the sidewalk and the car's at the curb, and she gets in and tells Callum everything. In the car, she calls Callum. Her voice is steady. She tells him what Derek said. All of it, including the threat about documentation in 3 locations. Callum listens without interrupting. When she finishes, there is a pause. I know about the documentation, he says. I have known about it for 11 days. It has been addressed. She closes her eyes briefly. How? Prentice Hale, he says. When he began cooperating with the federal investigation, one of the things he disclosed was the existence of that material and its locations. The prosecutor's office recovered it last week as part of the discovery process. She exhales slowly. Derek did not know it was gone, Callum says quietly. He has been threatening you with a weapon that no longer exists. Nora looks out the window at Chicago moving past, the city in January gray and purposeful, going about its business with the indifference she once found comforting and now finds simply honest. There is something else I need to tell you, Callum says. She waits. The documentation was real, he says. What it contained about me was accurate. I want you to know that. I am not going to tell you it was fabricated or that Derek was lying to manipulate you. What he had was true. The car moves through the city. I know, she says. A pause, I have known for a while, she says, what you are. I have been in your house for 2 months, Callum. I am not unobservant. He is quiet for a moment that stretches. I made a decision about it, she says. The same way I made a decision about staying. Not because I lacked information. Because I had it, Nora, he says. Her name in his voice like something he is being careful with. I am coming home, she says. We can talk there. She ends the call. She rides the rest of the way in quiet, watching the city give way to the suburbs, and then to the long road that winds through bare winter oaks, to the gate, the driveway, the house on the rise above the lake. She tells Callum to meet her on the terrace. He is there when she comes through the glass doors, standing at the railing the way he was standing the first day she arrived, looking at the water. The lake in January is very still, the surface barely moving under a sky the color of old pewter. She comes to stand beside him. He turns and looks at her with an expression she has never seen on his face before. Not in the cafe, not in Lily's room, not in any of the weeks she has been in this house. He looks uncertain. Callum Voss, who manages complicated things, who built an empire on the bedrock of not needing anyone to see his hand, who has been carrying the weight of what happened to his wife and the weight of his daughter's secret existence and the weight of everything that comes with being who he is for a very long time. He looks uncertain because he has given her all of the information and now the decision belongs to her and he has no way to manage the outcome. She looks at him and she thinks about what it means that this is the face he has right now standing at a railing above a January lake. She has seen him across a cafe table at 1 a.m. and across a dinner table with his daughter between them and across his own desk in the middle of a crisis and at the edge of this terrace on the first day she arrived when she was still a stranger and he was still something she had not yet decided how to understand. She has never seen him look like this, like someone who has put something down and does not know whether it will be picked back up. She thinks about the things she has built in the past 2 months, the call to Delia, the evidence she gathered with her own hands, the plan she designed and the trap she walked into with her eyes open, and the recording she made in a courthouse hallway with nothing but a phone and the knowledge of exactly what Derek would say when he thought he had leverage over her. She thinks about what it cost to build those things and what it proved. She built those things herself, not because she had nothing, because she finally understood that she had always had enough. Ask me, she says. Callum looks at her. You know everything, he says. What I am, what my world is, what it would mean to choose it. I know, she says. And you are still here. I am still here. He is quiet for a long moment, the way he is quiet when he is finding the right words rather than the easy ones. The lake is motionless below them. The January sky holds its pewter patience above. Then he says, I have loved you since the night you walked into that cafe in the rain. I told myself it was something simpler. Concern. The desire to help someone who needed it. Responsibility to a stranger in a difficult moment. I have been lying to myself about it since November, and I am done doing that. She looks at him, the gray eyes, the old grief that is healed as much as it is going to, and the new thing sitting alongside it, something alive and careful and afraid of its own aliveness. She thinks this is what it looks like when a man who has learned to keep everything at a distance decides to stop. I love you too, she says. I have been lying to myself about it for about 6 weeks. Something in him releases, not dramatically, just a kind of quiet settling, the way a held breath finally lets go. He reaches out and takes her hand. His fingers are warm against her cold ones, and she turns her palm to meet his and holds on. They stand at the railing above the still water for a long time without speaking. And it is enough, more than enough, to simply stand here and let the fact of it exist without requiring anything else of it yet. The city glitters in the far distance. The snow from Christmas is long gone, but the oaks still stand in their bare patience, waiting for whatever comes next. She knows what comes next. For the first time in a very long time, she knows exactly where she is going. The divorce is finalized on a Thursday morning in late January. Nora walks out of the Daily Center into pale winter sunlight. She is wearing a coat she bought herself with money from the account she opened last week in her own name. The butterfly bracelet is on her wrist. Her lawyer shakes her hand on the courthouse steps and says things that she receives warmly and does not entirely hear because she is looking at the sky, which is the pale blue that Chicago manages on clear winter mornings, a blue that looks like something recently washed clean. She breathes in and lets it out slowly. Callum is at the base of the steps, hands in his pockets, Lily beside him in a red coat that is slightly too bright for January and entirely right for the occasion. Lily sees her first and breaks from Callum's side at a run, which is absolutely against the decorum of courthouse steps and absolutely correct. Nora catches her. She holds on. Is it done? Lily asks into her shoulder. Is the bad man really gone now? Yes, Nora says. He is really gone. Good. Lily pulls back and looks at her with those dark, serious eyes. Because I made Garrett make a cake, and Oren said it was presumptuous, but I said it was optimistic, and I think there is a difference. Nora laughs. It comes out fully without monitoring, without checking the temperature of the room first. Just laughter out in the open January air, because a child made a cake out of optimism and is explaining the philosophy of it on the steps of the Daily Center. Callum reaches them. He looks at Nora, and she looks at him, and they stand there for a moment in the winter light, the three of them with the noise of the city around them and the sky above, and all of it present in the air between them. How do you feel, he asks. She thinks about it seriously. Like the person I was supposed to be, she says. The one who was waiting. He reaches out and tucks a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so quiet and considered that it takes her breath and says, she was worth waiting for. Come home, Lily says firmly. The cake is chocolate. They go home. The night before the wedding, after Lily is in bed and the house is quiet, Nora finds Delia in the kitchen. Delia flew in from Seattle 2 days ago and has since reorganized the spice cabinet with Garrett's enthusiastic collaboration and spent 3 hours with Lily discussing the relative merits of various drawing techniques with the seriousness of two people who both take art very seriously. She is sitting at the kitchen counter now with 2 cups of tea as if she knew Nora was coming. Nora sits down across from her. They do not say much. They have been talking for 3 days, filling in 3 years of silence, and now they have arrived at a place that does not need words. Delia reaches across the counter and puts her hand over Nora's, and Nora looks at her sister's face, and the two of them simply sit there in the warm kitchen while the house holds its nighttime quiet around them. This is what she lost when Derek sent those messages. This. The particular ease of someone who has known you since before you knew yourself, who does not need you to explain the context because they are the context. She has it back now. That is enough. That is more than enough. 5 months later, on a morning in May, when the oaks along the driveway have leafed out into full green and the lake is a different water, entirely warm and bright, and reflecting a sky that has forgotten. It was ever gray. Nora stands in the garden in a simple white dress with her hair loose and the butterfly bracelet on her wrist. Lily is beside her in pale yellow, practically vibrating with contained excitement. She has been involved in every decision made in the past 3 months, from the flowers to the seating to the specific chocolate cake that she considers her personal contribution to the institution of marriage. She takes this responsibility with characteristic seriousness. The ceremony is small. Stellan, Oren, and Garrett are there. Delia stands near the front in a blue dress she and Lily chose together on a video call with the focused collaboration of two people who share aesthetic opinions. A small number of people, whose names Nora has learned not to ask about, sit quietly in the chairs along the garden path, men who respect Callum enough to be here who will not be discussed at dinner. Nora had worried about this in the weeks leading up to the wedding, about the world that Callum moves in, about whether standing at an altar with him meant accepting everything that comes with him. She has turned the question over to many times and arrived at the same answer every time. She is not choosing Callum's world. She is choosing Callum. The same way she is choosing Lily in this house and the life she has been quietly building here since November. She is choosing it knowing what she knows, and she is choosing it freely, which is the only kind of choosing that matters. She has learned the difference between those two things. It cost her 8 years to learn it, but she learned it completely. When the music begins, Nora walks down the path alone. She has chosen this deliberately. She has been given away enough times in her life, surrendered enough agency, under enough different framings of love and care and what is best for her. She walks herself. She arrives under her own power. She chooses this of her own will with full knowledge of what she is choosing and what it costs and what it gives back. Callum watches her come toward him with the expression of a man who has been very still for a long time and is only now allowing himself to move. The minister says the words that ministers say, and then Callum speaks. He has written what he wants to say and has told no one what it is. His voice is steady. I promise to tell you the truth, he says, even when it is complicated, especially when it is complicated. I promise to stand beside you and not in front of you, to protect you, not by making your choices, but by giving you the ground to stand on while you make them yourself. And I promise that Lily and I will spend whatever time we have making sure you know that you are home. Nora looks at him and speaks. I promise to see you, she says, not the man you show the world, but the man in Lily's room with the soft voice and the amber light. I promise to stay when things are hard, not because I have no choice, but because I choose to. And I promise that whatever comes next, you will not carry it alone. They exchange rings. The minister says the words that make it official. Delia cheers from the front row with the decisiveness of a woman who has decided that courthouse decorum does not apply to a garden in May, and she is entirely right about this. Lily grabs both of their hands. Are we a family now, she asks. For real and official and everything. Nora looks at Callum. He looks at her. She crouches down to Lily's level. This child who draws the same lake in every season to watch how it changes, who moves the sad somewhere else when it arrives, who made a chocolate cake out of optimism and defended the philosophy of it on courthouse steps. We already were, Nora says. From the very beginning, we already were. Lily absorbs this with the seriousness it deserves. Then she says, good, because the cake is going to be amazing and it would be better with a real family eating it. She pulls them both toward the house with the confidence of a child who has decided how the story ends. Behind them, the garden holds the afternoon in its May light, the oaks casting long, bright shadows across the grass, the lake below catching the sun and throwing it back in pieces. The water that was iron gray in November is blue, now genuinely blue, the color of something that has been through its winter and come out the other side. Nora looks back at it once before the door closes. She thinks about the woman who stood in the rain outside a hotel in November with $31 in a ruined dress and the knowledge that she had finally had enough. She thinks about the cafe and the card and the stranger who asked a simple question and waited for the real answer. She thinks about all the nights she spent afraid and all the mornings she spent pretending and the hard and specific courage it took to do what she did. To walk out a door with nothing but herself and the understanding that herself was enough. She thinks about what she built from that. A sister reclaimed, evidence gathered with her own hands, a plan she designed, a recording she made, a room she walked into, and a man she looked at, and a truth she told not once but many times in many rooms, until the telling of it stopped costing her everything and started being simply what she did. She thinks about Lily on the floor of her blue-painted room, moving the sad somewhere else with a sketch pad and a careful stroke of gray. She thinks that is what these months have been. Not erasing the pain, not pretending it was not real, but giving it a different place, making room in the center for something else. For this. Lily tugs her hand. Nora goes inside. The door closes behind her, and the garden holds its light a while longer before the sun moves on, and the oaks stand in their patient green, and somewhere inside the house there is laughter, real and unguarded, and belonging entirely to people who have decided at some cost, and with their eyes fully open to be home. If you have watched this far, it is because this story found something in you. It found the part that knows what it is to be underestimated by someone who was supposed to see you clearly. The part that knows what it is to stay in a place that is slowly making you smaller. The part that wonders some mornings what would happen if you simply walked out the door and did not look back. Nora Callahan walked out the door. What she found on the other side was not easy, and was not simple, and was not without cost. But it was hers. Every piece of it belonged entirely to her. If you believe a person can rebuild from nothing but their own determination, leave a comment below. Let me know where you are watching from. I love seeing this community come together around stories that remind us what people are capable of when they finally stop being afraid. And if this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, hit that subscribe button. Because there are more stories like this one waiting for your own. Stories of people who chose themselves when no one else would. Stories of the kind of courage that does not announce itself, but simply does what needs to be done one day at a time until the life on the other side of the fear comes into view. Those stories are here, and so are you.